Hello, good morning and welcome to all of you. I am Rajesh Kumar Singhal and I am here to present a new lecture on the role of potassium in the plants. So friends, earlier we have discussed about the what is mineral nutrition. We also discussed about the what is micro and the macronutrients. We also discussed about the short distance and the long distance transport pathway of the nutrients. Then we have discussed about the biology of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and today we will discuss about the biology of the potassium. Okay, so because these three are the important elements and have different role in the plant growth and development. So let's start about the potassium. Okay, so potassium is a univalent cations, means it have one valency. Okay, second point is that its uptake is highly selective. So we have already discussed that nutrient or element which are found in less quantity in soils are mostly uptake by the highly, means they will uptake highly selective or by the high affinity transporters. Okay, high affinity transporters. Third point, that potassium is highly mobile in the plants. So deficiency symptom mostly observed on the older leaves, and potassium is the most abundant cation in the cytosols. Okay, so this is the most abundant cation in the cytosols. Next point is that potassium have outstanding role in plant water relationship. Then next, potassium is not metabolized and it forms only weak complexes in which it is readily exchangeable. Okay, means it forms very less complexes. Okay, next, it balances the charges of the soluble and insoluble anions. Okay, so this is a important cation and thus facilitate the stabilizing the pH. Means potassium also have important role in the stabilizing of the pH. तो कौन कौन से रोल हो गए? एक तो यूनिवेलेंट्स है, मीन्स इट है वन वैलेंसी, हाईली सेलेक्टिव बिकॉज जनरली soil are deficient in the potassium. Next, highly mobile in the plant, and this is the most abundant cations. Also, it's have important role in the plant water relationships. It also form the weak complexes and also balance the charge and facilitate the stabilizing the pH. Okay, so these are the some important role of the potassium. Next is the compartmentalization and the cellular concentration. So the potassium concentration are maintained at 100 to 200 millimolar in the cytosol, because in the last slide we have discussed that in the cytosol potassium is the dominant cations and the concentration is near to the 100 to 200 millimolar. Also in the chloroplast, and the bacular potassium concentration may vary between the 10 to 200 millimolar or even reach up to 500 millimolar in the guard cells of stomata, because it have important role in the plant water relationship. Okay, next, potassium concentration in the apoplast are usually low. So friends, this is about the cellular concentration of the potassium in the plants. Next, the potassium have important role in the activation of several important enzymes. So a large number of enzymes are either completely dependent on or are stimulated by the potassium ions. Okay, and this potassium ion activates the enzymes by the inducing conformational changes in the proteins. Okay, so how the potassium change the activate the enzymes by the inducing the conformational changes. Okay, next, most sensitive to the potassium deprivation or deficiency are the pyruvate kinase and the phosphofructokinase. So these two enzymes are the most sensitive to the potassium deficiency. Next, the activity of starch synthesis is also highly dependent on the univalent cations, and all of this potassium is the most effective. Okay, so starch synthesis is also dependent upon the potassium concentration. Next, activation of membrane bound proton pumping ATPase is also activated by the potassium concentration. Then potassium deficiency increase the activity of certain hydrolases or the oxidases such as polyphenol oxidase. It also increases the activity of certain hydrolases and the oxidases. Okay. Also, next is the accumulation of sugars in the mature leaf or older leaves is the consequences of the inhibited export from the leaves or the lower demand by the zinc organs such as growing leaves and fleshy fruits in tomato. Okay, so when there will be a potassium deficient, so it also affect the transport of the export of the sugars. So sugars are accumulated in the mature leaves. Okay, it also reduce the demand of the zinc organs. Okay, so this is about the concentration, that what are the concentration in the cytosol and in the vacuolar, then apoplast. Also there are large of numbers like pyruvate kinase, phosphofructokinase, starch synthetase, also some pump like proton pumping ATPase, then certain hydrolases and oxidase, polyphenol oxidase. They are dependent upon the potassium concentrations. Okay. Next function of the potassium is the protein synthesis. So this potassium is involved in several steps of the translation process. Okay, so in the translation process, that RNA converted into the protein. Okay, including the binding of the tRNA to ribosomes. Okay, so it regulates the binding of tRNA to ribosomes. Also the chloroplast protein, that is rubisco carboxylase, RUBP carboxylase, is regulated by the potassium. And you know that rubisco have major proteins, or it contribute the 16% of the total proteins in the plant. Also potassium regulate the nitrate reductase activity, so ultimately it affects the protein synthesis. So this potassium has important role in the protein synthesis. Okay, by regulating of translation process, RUBP carboxylase and the nitrate reductase activity. Next, the potassium ion has important role in the photosynthesis process. So potassium deficiency increase the stomatal resistance to the carbon dioxides. Also potassium regulate the photophosphorylation process. Also it increase the optimal RUB carboxylase activity. So by this potassium have important role in the photosynthetic process. Okay. Next important role of the potassium in the osmoregulations. Okay. So potassium regulate the Turgor driven cell extension. Means Turgor means when in the cells, when there will be a high concentration of potassium, there is a movement of water inside the cells. So this is known as Turgor driver cell extension. So it increase the expansion or extension of the cells. A decrease in the apoplastic pH is necessary to the activate enzymes involved in the cell wall loosening. Okay, so potassium ion reduce the pH, which activates the cell wall loosening enzymes. Okay, also this potassium have important role in the stem elongation by the gibberellic acids. Means this process is also dependent upon the potassium supply. Means gibberellic acid have some correlation with the potassium supply. Okay, so this gibberellic acid stimulate the stem. So these protein synthesis, photosynthesis, and osmoregulation are also the important function of the potassium. Next, stomata movement. So already discussed that in the guard cells, the potassium concentration is very high and it can be reached up to 500 millimolar. So turgor change in the guard cell, this is also regulated by the potassium ions and increase their osmotic pressures. Also potassium have important role in the opening of stomata. And the slow response of sugar-loaded guard cells is presumably the reason for the sluggish movement and incomplete opening and closure of the stomata in potassium deficient plants. Means already discussed that when there will be a deficiency of potassium, there will be a accumulation of sugar. So when there will be a accumulation of sugar in the guard cells, then there will be a response or movements of the stomata is reduced. Okay, so this is known as sluggish movement of the stomata, and also it causes the incomplete opening and closing of the stomata. The incomplete closure of the stomata is responsible for the typical building of the potassium deficient plant exposed to the drought stress. Okay, so this potassium also have important role in the stomata movement. Next is the photonestic and seismonestic movement. Okay, so potassium ion have important role in the photonestic and seismonestic movements. So circadian rhythm is also controlled by the potassium ion concentration, and the movement of leaves, also of leaflets, are brought about by the reversible turgor changes in the specialized tissue that is known as motor organ or the pulvini. So this in these plants, potassium has important role in the turgor maintenance. Okay, in Mimosa pudica, the leaflet fold within a few seconds and reopen after about 30 minutes is regulated by the potassium ion. So this photonestic and seismonestic movements is also regulated by the potassium concentration. Now the potassium has important function in both the loading of sucrose and the transport of this sucrose, or rate of the mass flow driven solute transport in the C tubes of the phloem. So it regulates the both the process, means loading and the transport. Okay, and this potassium provide the biotic and abiotic stress tolerance, and potassium deficiency lead to the reduction of turgor pressure in older leaves, necrosis, margin to the tapes, necrotic spores, more fungal attacks, abnormal development, vascular tissue collapse of the vascular tissue, and susceptible to the abiotic stress. So these are the some typical symptoms of the potassium deficiency. So I hope you understand that what is the important role of potassium in the plant growth and development. So thank you, friend.